Welcome to InterPartyConflict, the podcast where we answer your questions so you can have the best tabletop gaming experience possible. I'm Gabe.
And I'm Jeff.
And today we're going to answer your questions. To start off, though, Jeff, how are you doing today?
Not too bad. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good.
I've been pretty busy and hoping to have a good experience with this.
Yeah, this should be fun.
So I guess to start off, rather than answering a user question or a listener question, I'm going to ask, what is your first gaming experience? How did you get into D&D, tabletop gaming, whatever?
As far as tabletop gaming, that would have to be through our friend Steven, who introduced me to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Friend of the podcast, Steven.
But before that, actually, we would. He had like a collection of like board games that he got from like garage sales and things like that, and he would like take all the figures and things and put them together and try to make a game out of it. We were basically trying, like, he would always try to run Dungeons and Dragons without knowing what Dungeons and Dragons was, and then eventually found Dungeons and Dragons. It was like, this is something to play. So
if I recall, wasn't there a time there was an episode of Dexter's Laboratory that you guys kind of used as like a base?
That was I think this was before this was right around the time when I first met Steven, was like right around there. Like it wasn't with me that he was watching that episode, but yeah, the way I remember him telling the story is that it's an episode of Dexter's Laboratory where they play a game. They didn't call it Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
But yeah, it was basically Dungeons and Dragons. They're like, yeah, let's play that game. Where's that game at? And then they eventually figured out, oh, it's this game called Dungeons and Dragons. Let's play that.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, one day Steve brought over Advanced, like a little starter set or something, like a starter adventure, had like bugbears in it or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember doing that.
Well, cool. Now, I know a lot of people got in the game with stuff like Heroes Quest. Did you ever play that? Or, Okay.
What's Heroes Quest?
It's some sort of a board game that was very much like D&D, and it had like miniatures, and I don't know. I for some reason I thought you had played that. I guess I was wrong.
I mean, it's possible it was among the board games that Steven had collected.
Yeah.
But I just remember, he had like a bunch of figurines and like play set things that we were just kind of like make up. I think we played in a turn-based strategy game on his bedroom floor using like random pieces of different like board games and things like that.
Yeah, I'm sure Legos probably.
There were some Legos. There were some really neat ones. I have no idea what they were, but there were some neat figures he had. Like, it was just some random stuff. But yeah, as far as tabletop gaming, that's like my first experience.
Okay, cool. Well, for myself, the first ever tabletop gaming experience I had was I want to say I was in 7th or 8th grade. My oldest brother had moved away to college in Chicago. I went to go visit him, and he was playing some sort of a tabletop game. It wasn't D&D. It might have been GURPS. I'm actually not sure, but I was visiting him, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to be playing this game with my friends." He asked me if I wanted to join. I didn't really know what it was, but he said it's kind of like it's like a board game, but minus the. Well, no. He said it was like a computer game, but minus the computer. And so I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. I was somehow able to convince him to let me make like a custom class. I was a dragoon or something. I had like a special jump attack I could do. It was probably super broken, but I don't know. The players in the group were super friendly, and they they were having a lot of fun with it. I like sort of got wind of a lot of their little in jokes and stuff, and it was fun. Then at the end of the session, because the DM knew that I wasn't going to be playing with them again, he gave me a cloak of invincibility. So, yeah.
Well, I think for a player's first time, especially even when it's with a group of people, like, it's important to like kind of give them that little let them be that dragoon, so that like it becomes a fun experience for them and they'll come back to it.
Right.
Because I want to say, like, the first time I played with Steve, like, I was like, okay, I'm gonna be like this character from this video game that I like. I tried to make like, I couldn't remember I tried to make like Cloud Strife or something like that. Like, I was like, just like a giant sword or something like that. So like, you kind of throw them that, you gotta throw them that bone to get them hooked, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But trying to make up your own class or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think again, I know it wasn't D&D. Whatever game they were playing, there was a class that did have a jump attack, but it cost mana or something. And so I had to like spend mana to do this jump attack, and I think it counted as like an automatic critical threat or something. And there was one point in the fight where like I rolled a 20 on it on top of that, so like there was a chance that I might have killed a dragon in one hit, but the DM had to like scramble and look at some table or something. And I did not kill a dragon in one hit, but I did do a whole lot of damage. So that was my first experience with any kind of tabletop role playing. I eventually played actual D&D a few years later. I was in high school. I was on this little summer trip to in Chicago again, actually, to this little college class program. I was in high school, but I was with our video program. I was taking a couple college classes, and one of the guys that was also part of that program, he was like, "Hey, I know how to play D&D. Let's all play D&D." And so he tried to teach us how to play D&D. I don't think he really knew what he was doing. At one point, he was trying to explain the difference between putting a stat in intelligence and putting a stat in wisdom. And with him, it came down to, well, do you want your search to be higher or your spot to be higher? And at the time, I guess that helped me answer the question. But like nowadays, I'm thinking back, I'm like, there is so many more things to that decision. I was playing a paladin, for crying out loud. Of course, I would want higher wisdom. Anyway, but I didn't have a great experience with that. But then a few weeks later, one of my classmates, when we were back in school, when my classmates heard that I had played D&D and I had a good time, he put me in touch with another classmate who had a D&D group. I went over to his house. His name was Dave. He taught me how to play, and I guess the rest is history. Although I was a terrible player and an even worse DM at the time.
Yeah, we all start off with some bad habits.
Yes, yes. I might get into how I became a better player and a better DM as we get through the questions, but I think I'll just leave that right there. So, Jeff, do you want to get into questions?
Yeah, sure. Let's go right for it.
Okay. So here we have a question from Paizo.com, message board user, Baron Aaron Heshvaughn. What is the ideal number of players in a group? Personally, I prefer smaller groups because I think when you have a smaller group, you can give more attention to each player. I know that generally the games, different editions are different, but in D&D, they expect you to have either 4 or 5 players plus the DM. Like, I think in 3rd edition and 3.5, the archetypal group, archetypical, whatever the word is, the group was a fighter, a cleric, a wizard, and a rogue, plus the DM. So 4 players plus the DM. Personally, I think the best campaigns I've ever run had 3 players plus the DM. There were quite a few campaigns that we ran with me as the DM, and then you, our friend Steven, and our other mutual friend Jay. So the three of you and me. There was also a couple campaigns that Jay ran where it was Jay and the 3 of us. You know, there may have been one other player or something, but personally, I like 3 players plus the DM. I think that's a good balance.
Yeah, I mean, I've only ever really played in smaller groups, but yeah, it does seem like that larger groups it would get a little messy. Like, I mean, combat sometimes can drag on like long. Yeah. Even with smaller groups,
a lot of people ask questions about that.
Yeah, and so like with more people, it takes longer for combat, and then also when you have more people at a table, like there's more room for people getting distracted and things like that.
Definitely.
Going off on jokes and tangents and things like that, which is all good and fun, but like the less of those, the more the more quickly you can get through the night.
Yeah,
because D&D, although fun, can sometimes take a lot of time.
Yes, and as I feel like as the years have gone by, we've taken more and more time with our games. I remember when I first started DMing, we had this was before you joined our group. We had a combat that lasted like I think 4 hours, and we were like, "Holy crap! This one combat lasted 4 hours. That's crazy." Fast forward 2 or 3 years, and like it's like, okay, we're 5 hours into this combat. Should we take a break and get some food so that we can come back and spend another 3 hours?
Right.
Maybe. Well, let's see if we can finish this in an hour or two.
Yeah, I have like an 8-hour night, and it's half of it. Yeah. More than half of it is a combat.
When I was running Age of Worms a bunch of years ago, I don't remember how many times we would finish a session at like 4 a.m. because it just, we didn't want to stop. It just kept going and kept going.
Yeah.
And we were teenagers at the time, and nothing could stop us.
Right. Yeah. We had nothing. We had nothing to do the next day. We were just like, okay, let's keep doing this.
Yeah. Nowadays, I work the night shift, and I go to bed at 4 in the morning every night, and that still feels like too late. A lot of people can. There are a lot of people that can have large groups, and they can handle it just fine. If that's the case, all the power to you. Just one quick little anecdote. A bunch of years ago, I was hired by a library near where I live to teach some people how to play D&D. A friend of mine at the time was friends with the son of the person who was in charge of the library activities or whatever. And so they got me and these 2 other guys to come in on one day. We were going to teach some kids how to play D&D, and then, it would take a couple hours and it'd be fun. We'd get paid money for it. In preparation for that day, I made a whole bunch of sample characters because I figured it would save time at the table. And so I made maybe 12 or 13 sample characters. I showed up at the library that day and found out the other 2 guys didn't show up. They weren't coming. And so it was just me, and there were 10 or 11 or 12 kids that were all waiting to learn to play D&D. And it was just me. So I figured, well, I've got all these characters. So it was difficult, but what I did was I handed each player a character. I very, very briefly told everybody what their character was and what they, what their whole thing was. I talked about how you actually play the game, and then I basically had a scripted combat where I gave each player 2 turns. So I would go through everybody once and then through everybody a second time. Each time it was somebody's turn, I made sure to focus entirely on that player so that they could get a little moment in the spotlight, so they could feel like they were doing something cool. And then once their turn was done, I went to the next person, did the same thing with them. And after everybody got 2 turns, then I was like, okay, the bad guy's dead. And everybody seemed to have a good time. So that was a good example of how that could go. But it was very, very heavily scripted, like I said. I don't really think I would be a good DM for a group that big on any other kind of a scale. I feel like that worked that time. I don't ever want to do that again. It only worked because I had done a lot of prep beforehand specifically for something like that.
Right. Yeah. You knew where it was going to be going for the most part.
All right.
But that's still impressive dealing with that bunch of kids.
Yeah. It was
let alone new players.
Yeah. It was. I was actually pretty cool with. I was pretty happy with how everybody treated it. I got asked back the following year because I had done such a good job with that one. And for the record, I did get paid 3 times as much because I got the money the other guys would have gotten.
Well, that was nice of them to actually offer you that.
So the following year, they asked me to find 2 guys that I knew, so I did, and then I noticed a lot of the same people came back the following year. So that's cool. It was pretty cool. I did not do as good the following year because I did not do as much preparation. So that may be a running theme. Always prepare a lot. All right. So on to the next question. This is from Reddit user Zeus and his Beard. How to manage combat efficiently and successfully. I got a lot of questions about this.
Yeah, this ties into the length of some combat sessions.
Yes, it does. Combat does take a long time, especially in D&D. I'm sure there are other role-playing games that do it faster. But in a game like D&D where there are so many rules, there's so many options that you have, they kind of do have to have, there has to be a lot that you can do, and they have to have a lot of ways to handle everything the player wants to do. So, of course, it can take a long time. So in keeping with what I said at the end of the last question, I would say preparation is probably the biggest thing here.
Yeah.
Both for the players and for the DM. Of course, for the DM, because the DM has, however many monsters he's running. He's got to remember all of their abilities. He's got to remember all their hit points, their ACs, everything. Preparation is key, but also not just for the DM, for the players.
Right, yeah, for players, but it's more for turn-to-turn preparation.
Yes.
I have a really bad habit of not paying attention during combat because I'm more trying to think of okay, what cool thing can I be doing? So I'm trying to prepare, but really I'm not paying attention. So the thing that I'm preparing in my mind is no longer effective like in the combat, because like when I come back to it, I'm like, oh wait, what's going on? Who's been hit? Shoot.
Yeah, you might be planning to do a big cool attack on this one guy, but then when you come back, either he's dead or he's on the other side of the battlefield, or whatever.
When one of your allies has been hurt and you're the healer, and you're like, wait a minute, crap.
Yeah, so preparation, I think, is the first thing that should come into it. Another thing to do is, I don't remember who suggested this to us, but like for a long time, whenever it's somebody's turn, we'll tell the next person that you're on deck. So like, Jeff, if it's your turn, I'll tell Steven, you're on deck. So they can start getting their turn ready beforehand. Now, like you were saying, you don't want to put too much focus into coming up with what you're going to do and less focus on the table, but try to focus on both.
I mean, within a turn, that's not a bad, but it's like, like right after I'm done with my turn, I'm already distracted and thinking about my next turn, or I just get distracted by something else completely. But definitely try to keep track of what's going on. That's good. It's just kind of preparing and knowing what your character can do ahead of time is a very good thing.
I agree. Yeah.
That's definitely like, know your character very well. Like, because you know your character to a certain point, but like knowing all of the ins and outs, all of the abilities and things like that, trying to know when and where to use things.
Yeah, and I would even say, like, if you can, try to come up with some sort of just like a default action that you take. If your turn comes around and you're like, oh crap, I didn't plan anything, whatever, I attack. Yeah, go for it. As long as you attack the nearest person, or if you want to be more defensive, just say, if I don't know what I'm going to do, I'll just go full defensive. Whatever edition you're playing, I'm sure has rules for some sort of a defensive action.
I feel like some editions do that better than others, because there are some editions where like there's really not something you can just do whenever. Like, you can either use up an ability that you can only use once per day, or you do something that's basically like standing around. I want to say like in like 3.5 or something like that, there wasn't much you can do other than maybe like, I'll go total defense to raise my AC or something like that. But in like 4th edition, there's you always got your at will abilities, and there's always something you can be doing. And for the most part, they're all at least somewhat useful. They're not going to be like the thing that wins the battle, but they're not going to be a waste of a turn. Yeah.
Another thing I would say that the players, mainly the players, but also the DM, I suppose, could do is when you're rolling to attack, roll your attack and your damage at the same time. If you have multiple attacks, roll them all at the same time. Just make sure that you have, like, if you have a couple different sets of dice that are different colors, have one color, roll your d20 and your damage die of one color. That's your first attack. So like my red ones, that's my first attack. My blue ones, that's my second attack. And that way, you don't have to, there's always the time of, okay, I roll to attack. Okay, I got a 25. Okay, I hit. Where's my die?
Right.
Okay, here's my die. I'm going to roll that. Okay, I got 8 damage. Whereas you could just be, just roll them all at the same time.
So dice preparation.
Well, I suppose.
It's having all your dice on hand. I like to set mine up in neat little rows.
I'm sure everybody has stacked them up in a tower at some point or another.
Right. The tower of dice.
Yeah. So just pay attention and be prepared. And like, I know there's some people that have difficulty with numbers or whatever, but like, at least know which die you're supposed to roll. There's always the people that are like, ooh, hang on, which die am I supposed to roll? Oh, the 20-sided die. Oh, okay. It's like, that's the same die you've had to roll for every single attack, every single skill check for the last 6 months.
Well, D20 is one thing, but I'm pretty guilty of like wait a minute, is this a D8 or a D6? What do I do? Shoot.
So I guess that's not a huge problem, but like, if you can, try to familiarize yourself with what you're doing. Yeah,
and it's basically do your homework, which is a kind of a silly thing to say about a game, but I mean, like, D&D, like, tabletop games are their work, but it's like, work can be fun. Like, it's a good time. Like, I think I enjoy creating characters more than I like playing sometimes. Like, I mean, like, there are some times where I get really into making a character. Like, this is the cool, like, I like building a little stat block and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, and you know, with my experience where it's like I build a character based on one idea, and then that idea never pops up, and then it's like, oh, that's. It's like, and then, or like you build a character around that one idea, and then when it does come up, you roll a 1 or a 2 or something like that. So
of course, yeah,
So preparation and
preparation and paying attention are really that will solve most of the problems that people have with combat taking too long. There's always going to be other stuff, but just work with everything as it comes, and try to just be familiar with what you got.
Cool.
Okay, let's go to the next question. This is from Reddit user D Callahan. And I'm actually going to combine this with another question. His question is miniatures, yay or nay? And I'm going to combine this with a question from Reddit user Zeus and his beard. Miniature hacks. How to make or use cost-effective miniatures if you don't feel like dishing out big bucks on plastic figurines. That's a good question. I think miniatures are really cool. However, like Zeus and his beard said, they can cost a lot of money. And I've always felt it's a little weird to spend a bunch of money on miniatures. Like, let's say you have, okay, I've got a goblin. Well, what if they're not fighting a goblin? Well, I guess I'll use this goblin anyway. And it's like, well, why did you have to spend all that money on the goblin? Really, why did you need miniatures to begin with if they aren't always going to be representative of what the players are fighting? If you like buying miniatures, if you want to spend the money on miniatures, go for it. I'm sure it'll be great. But personally, I only own a couple miniatures. I don't think I use them very often.
Yeah, right. There's not too many.
What I use mainly is I use dice. I've already got a ton of dice.
So many.
People come and play D&D with me and then leave their dice at my house, and then I never hear from them again. All the time.
Yeah, he's got a big Tupperware container of it.
Yes, I have so many dice. So what I do is I use dice, and that way this solves a few problems. Number one, I can group enemies based on what they are. So let's say I have 4 goblins and 2 orcs. I can have the 2 orcs be D8s and then the 4 goblins be D6s. And that way I know at a glance that these ones are the same and these ones are the same. But at the same time, because they're dice and they have numbers on them, I can know which one is which. So if somebody has hit goblin number 2, I can make a note on my paper. I can make a note that goblin number 2 has taken however many damage, and I don't have to remember, oh wait, which one's number 2. I know which one's number 2 because it's the one with the number 2 on it. And so because I already have a lot of miniatures I already have a lot of dice, and because I like the benefits that dice afford me, I personally think dice are some of the best miniatures you can have. Of course, like I said, if you want to spend money on miniatures, go for it. I'm sure your players will love having, especially for players. Mm. If the players want to have unique miniatures, that's awesome.
Yeah, I feel like that'd be the important. If you're gonna use miniatures at all, it would be the most important for the players, just so they can wrap their head around their own character.
Yes,
get more into the game, that sort of thing.
Yeah. A campaign that we were in fairly recently, one of the players offered to buy each of us a custom-made miniature. There's a website. Was it Hero Forge?
Shoot, I think that's what it was called. Well, I mean, we can link it somewhere.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, we'll see.
But we'll try to get it to you at some point.
Yeah, Hero Forge sounds right.
I think it's Hero Forge.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it was a neat little site where you can design and pose a miniature, and it was a decent amount of customization to it. And then you can always, of course, paint it yourself and that sort of thing. Right.
And then they had different materials you could pick. Some were better for painting, but were more expensive or whatever. You could get ones that were like bronze or something.
Yeah, it was like brass or bronze or something like that.
Not for me, but
and I'm sure there's a few sites out there like that. But we'll try to find that one.
Yeah, so I would say if you feel like you have to get miniatures, at least get them for the players. And then if you just can't afford them, don't worry about it. You can use dice. Also, let's say you don't even have a lot of dice. A lot of people will print out little, like, I'm trying to think of how to describe it in
it's like little tokens.
Well, yeah, tokens work. I've seen people, they kind of picture. I'm doing a terrible job of. So they'll have a little piece of paper that they fold in half so it stands up, And then on
use your hands to describe something over a microphone.
That's what I'm doing. I'm sorry.
No,
sorry.
It's okay.
They do this.
Okay, like
with
that?
The miniatures, like that.
Yeah.
You can print out paper miniatures and then like fold them in half so they stand up.
Okay, yeah, all right, yeah, I'm picturing it now. Actually, yeah.
Okay,
it's something out of like those paper doll books.
Yeah,
something used to get like you cut it out and then it had like a little tab on it that you'd fold over and it would stand up, but then it would always fall over.
Well, of course.
But I mean, I get some nice card stock.
Yes, card stock.
There you go. Coins.
Yeah, coins could work. I remember a long time ago, Jay ran a campaign.
Yes.
There was a battle we had where we were up against 100 orcs, was it? Or was it Githyanki or something? 100 of something.
I don't know if it was Githyanki. It was, I would think it was something, like goblins or orcs or something like that. Something. But yeah, it was like a table full of pennies.
Yeah, table full of pennies. And I think that worked pretty good.
Right.
That was a fun encounter.
I mean, it just, we had things like Flame Strike and things like that to deal with that many things. Like, it was a good time, though.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
So there's lots of options if you don't want to spend a lot of money on miniatures. There's lots of options. You can, and heck, there are even people that don't use miniatures, that don't use a grid. 5th edition, I think, especially is kind of focused in this way. I find that playing without a grid, it has advantages and disadvantages. I know this isn't really the question, but when you play with a grid, I feel like that kind of lends a particular mindset to the players. Like, let's say the players go to the tavern and they're going to go talk to some guy, whatever, find out where some body is buried so they can dig it up and give it a proper burial. I don't know, whatever. If the players show up at the bar and the players look down at the table and there is a bar drawn out on the grid on your battle mat, they're probably going to have an idea that a battle is going to take place. Right. So they might be more willing to get into a fight than they would have otherwise. So that can be a disadvantage of using something like that. But at the same time, if your players are always, if you use a grid for everything, whether it's combat or not, you can condition your players to just be used to there being a grid, even when there isn't combat. Maybe they'll even, like, let's say a couple of the players are having a conversation in character and one of them wants to, get angry and walk off. He could do that with his miniature or something. I don't know.
Do the little, like, tap, tap, tap.
Yeah, so there's advantages and disadvantages to using a grid. If you don't use a grid, it's a little bit harder because you have to do a better job of explaining positioning in order for certain things to work, you have to do a better job of explaining positioning. It's really hard in certain editions to talk about flanking or like attacks of opportunity when you don't have a grid, when you're not using miniatures. But then 5th edition, I think, simplified a lot of that. For example, is it that flanking isn't really a thing in 5th edition? Is that what it is? I keep getting my editions mixed up.
I think you're right, because I remember they added like the advantage and disadvantage system, I believe.
Okay. But for a rogue to sneak attack, I think you just have to be adjacent to another, like at least one ally has to be adjacent to an enemy. I don't know. This is terrible.
But it does make it a little bit simpler where you don't have to be drawing a line through a grid to figure out whether or not you're considered flanking.
Right. Yeah. So it is very, very possible and advantageous in some ways to do a theater of the mind rather than a grid and miniatures. It's a little bit more work, and some players might have a hard time with it. I think I would probably have a harder time with it than some people, because for so many years I've been used to using a grid. And but it's all what your group is up for, and I'm sure anybody can learn to do it. So you can have a good time no matter what.
Yeah, I've at least always used like graph paper.
Yes, yeah, everybody's got graph paper somewhere.
Yeah, it's just, I've always used at least graph paper to at least represent like the dungeon layout or something like that. Like you'd make a little dungeon out of graph paper,
right? And also, sorry, one more thing about battle mats. Again, this isn't really what the question was about.
I mean, it's related.
Goes hand in hand.
Because I mean, if you're talking to miniatures, you're talking miniatures for the use of using a grid and battling and things like that.
Those can be kind of expensive, especially if you want a big one. However, when I first started DMing, I didn't have one, so I made one. I just bought a piece of poster board from I don't know, Kroger or whatever grocery store probably is not in the area that these people are listening to.
Who knows?
Farmer Jack or Pamida or something.
Carl's.
Exactly. And then I bought a big piece of poster board, and then I just got it laminated at Kinko's or whatever. So you can there's for just about anything in D&D, there's low budget options for everything. There's some way. If there's a will, there's a way. Also, if there's a will, there's probably a reflex and a fortitude.
Good, very good. No, I do know that like for like game mats, because you can, they're not super cheap, but then like you can get the ones that, because there's ones that are like bordered really nicely.
Yeah.
But then there's ones that are like cut weird, and they're just kind of like, they're just like the end of the reel or whatever.
That's a good point. Go to your local gaming store, if you have a local gaming store, and see.
If you don't have a local gaming store, move somewhere where you have a local gaming store.
Yes. A lot of the time they will have, like Jeff was saying, they're sort of like they were cut from the end of the roll, so they're a little bit irregular.
Mm-hmm.
But usually you can get those for a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
So you'll get some sort of discount, and functionally it'll be exactly the same thing.
Yeah. If anything, you can always like kind of cut it up so it's a little bit more. Because sometimes they're kind of like they were like on an angle or something. I think.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, so you can always dress it up a little nicer, but yeah, you get a lot cheaper.
Yeah,
and it's still made out of the same material and everything.
Okay.
So here's from Reddit user Zeus and his beard again. Table rules. Which ones are common and how to encourage them? So it's like table rules, like basically like don't eat at the table, although that's never one to...
Yeah, I don't think that's a common one.
No, it's definitely not a common one. But I think things like, like don't bring a phone to the game or that sort of thing, or like put your phone on silent, that sort of thing. Because I do remember always keeping my phone in my shoe, because I leave my shoes at the door, and I put my phone in my shoe so I wouldn't be ringing off in the middle of a game. But then sometimes people couldn't get a hold of me. Yeah. But yeah, basically, like it's more like it's more like proper etiquette, sort of like gaming etiquette, where you're like be there with your friends, be there in the game. Try not to have any distractions, because basically distractions adds towards the length of the game, and not everybody wants to be there until 4 a.m.
Yeah. Really, just think of it this way. Everybody's taken time out of their schedule to be at the game. So don't be the guy that causes everybody to have to wait. There's other things I could be doing with my time. There's other places I could be. So, but I know that about everybody else. So I always try to be as courteous as possible. Just kind of common courtesy. Don't bring distractions to the table. Just make sure that when you're there, you're focused on the game, so that everybody can be there. Everybody can that can be what their time is focused on.
I guess another example for table rules could be things like, always bring something to the table. Like, I guess like snacks and things like that. Yeah. Some people can have the rules of like, okay, everybody bring at least one food item or a drink or something like that. Back in when we played with Jay, we'd always have we had so many 2-liter bottles.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And then didn't he keep them up in his ceiling or something?
Yeah, there was a bit of ducting up in the ceiling, and you just stuff the 2-liter bottle up above that. We had a little collection of it. So little things like that just makes the experience more friendly, and everybody's there to have a good time. Yeah. And if you're gonna be there for several hours, you might as well have something to snack on. Yeah.
And anything that you can do to make everybody else's time at the table better, do it. Yeah. If you think something would help enhance the gaming experience for everybody else, suggest it, or just start doing it, and everybody else can follow by example, or lead by example. Whatever it is, everybody can do it because you're the example.
Yeah. I guess other things could be just topics of discussion that that shouldn't be I guess in a lot of situations, don't talk politics or religion or something like that.
Yeah.
Which can be tough in a game that usually has something to do with it's fictional, but it's politics and religion.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
So if you're gonna bring up politics and religion, make sure it's
make sure it's something that the group is okay with.
Make sure it's a part of the It's within the pantheon of D&D or whatever game you're playing.
Right. Actually, you made me think of a good point. Whenever you start a new campaign, you should probably go over some ground rules about what type of a campaign that you're going to have, as far as like how serious you want it to be, how much joking you want there to be at the table.
Right, yeah.
If, like I said, everybody's there to play D&D, so you don't want to waste everybody's time. That being said, if everybody is the kind of person that they're fine with, making pop culture references and making Monty Python references and so on.
Homestar Runner references.
Right. That's fine, as long as it's okay with the group. If the group is trying to, get everybody together and get started and stay focused on the game, then you should stay focused on the game. But, if that's... I don't want to tell anybody that they shouldn't be having more fun at the table.
Stop laughing. Stop having fun.
Exactly. If everybody is having fun with it, that's fine. But if somebody brings it up and says, hey, I think we're spending too much time yucking it up at the table, then maybe you should cut it back. But just make sure you know what the group as a whole wants.
Yeah. Everybody should know what they're there for, like what they're there for, the reason they're there. I mean, obviously overall have a good time.
Right.
But
yeah, this is a game that hopefully you're playing with your friends.
Yeah.
So number one, you want to have fun because it's a game, and number two, you want to still be friends afterwards.
Right.
So yeah. This is from Reddit user Maddie J. Pitleth. I've got a little bit to go into on this question. So the question is, how best to tweak a monster stat block to represent more of a challenge without compromising the original flavor of the monster?
This is a good one.
I have two things that I want to talk about with that. Number one, going directly off of what he's saying, how do you make a monster more challenging without necessarily just like bumping up its stats, I think.
Right, or changing it altogether, basically.
Yeah. Well, so one thing I would say, never underestimate the power of good tactics. A monster stat block, exactly as written, can be so much more of a challenge if you play it effectively. Now, of course, you want to keep in mind how intelligent the monster is. Depending on the edition, some editions are more about, realistic intelligence and such. Like a third edition, a goblin is probably going to have like a 7 or an 8 intelligence, whereas like, some sort of like a animated table or something is not going to have an intelligence score.
Right.
Whereas in something like 4th edition, I think for game balance purposes, even an animated table is still going to have an intelligence score of something. So, of course, depending on the edition, keep in mind of how intelligent the creature is. You don't want to have a goblin using, advanced trigonometry to ambush the party or whatever, but having a plan that is in keeping with what the monster is able to do can go so far in making that monster more challenging. There was a group I started playing with after I'd been DMing for maybe a year. I was not a very good DM at the time. I started playing with another group that I actually found online. There was a website you could go to where you put in your city, where you what editions you've played, and then your email address. And a guy emailed me. He said, hey, I'm playing a D&D game. He invited me into his group. These guys that I played with were so intelligent at how they played the game. The first session I ever played with these guys, I think we were 8th level characters. So we started fairly high level. We were up against 2 Ankegs, which are these like big bug things that they burrow and I think like spit acid or something.
I remember Ankegs from was it Baldur's Gate?
Yeah.
There was Ankegs in Baldur's Gate. I used to fight those to get the Ankeg armor because it was cool and green. Yeah.
There you go.
I remember Ankegs.
So this encounter, there were three of us that were 8th level PCs, and I want to say Ankegs in 3rd edition were like a CR4. So 2 CR4s against 3 8th level players. Numerically, we're going to mop the floor with them, right? Like,
right.
Obviously. But no. The DM, his name was John, he knew what he was doing. He had the Ankegs grab people and then start burrowing through the ground, which they're able to do. And when they burrow through the ground, they sometimes leave a tunnel, sometimes they don't. And like, basically in one round, these 2 Ankegs completely isolated 2 members of this 3-person party, leaving one person, me, on the surface doing nothing. God. And then one of the players managed to escape. The other one tried fighting it like down in this hole in the ground. And one of the players ended up dying. In this campaign, we each had like one free true res, so like that player immediately came back to life. But like one player got killed, another player got reduced to like a quarter of his hit points or something, all because the DM didn't just plop them down at one end of a hallway against the players on the other end of a hallway and say roll initiative.
Right.
You know, you can do things like that. You can have goblins set traps. I know that traps do typically have their own stat block and their own challenge rating and everything. So that may not be in keeping with what the question was, because that does increase the level of the encounter. But you can do so much just by planning out what you're doing. The worst thing you can do is, like I said, just plop them down at the end of a hallway or in a big open room and say roll initiative, and then go from there. That is the weakest you will ever make a monster, is when you just throw them into a lackluster environment and have them go. You really need to plan out the encounter. If it is at all an intelligent creature, it is going to try and fight in the most advantageous way possible, in the most advantageous environment possible. And don't be afraid to have enemies run away if it makes sense, and then have them show up later.
Yeah, that could be fun too. Like even just like the smallest little critter, if it gets away, you know, like it's that one that got away, and then if you see it again, you're like, oh, it's that thing, you know, like it's the swarm of beetles that got away from us. So like there was
in the first campaign I ever played for more than one session, we were fighting a dragon. We went to this swamp, and it was a lackluster enemy in a lackluster environment, whatever, because the group I was playing with were not the greatest. But it was a black dragon, and he had the ability to cast darkness on himself. So he put this sphere of darkness around himself, which meant that for the entire encounter, none of us could see. We had to make listen checks in order to tell what square he was in, and then every time we attacked him, we had to roll a 50% miss chance or just miss him outright. We still managed to almost kill him. We got him down to, I believe, 1 hit point. And then he ran away. And as he was flying away, the party ranger pulled out his bow, fired a bow at the center of that giant black sphere up in the sky, and, you know, the DM, whatever, he made his check. The player made his check so he could choose the right square. He rolled a natural 20 on his attack roll, but then missed on the 50% miss chance. So this dragon got away. And I don't think the dragon ever came back, because we didn't play for that many sessions after that. The campaign fell apart, as they do. Mm-hmm. But every adventure, we'd be like, holy crap, we're not going to see that dragon again, aren't we? And then like there's another time we fought an ogre that got away, and we're like, crap, the ogre's going to be riding the dragon.
Yeah, they're gonna be best buds and like talk about how they got away from those stupid players.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, like, but that could creates reoccurring bad guys, or even ones that don't necessarily reoccur, but those ones that got away can make for a good story.
Definitely, yeah. So now another reading of this question. Again, how do you present more of a challenge without compromising the original flavor of the monster? The important thing to note here is that the flavor of the monster is what is important. In most cases, I would say the flavor of the monster is what's important. So I'm going to let you in on a little trick. This is a little DM secret that I've used for years. I didn't come up with it. I don't remember who told it to me, but it is like the golden ticket for DMs for making interesting encounters. It doesn't matter what monster the stat block belongs to. All that matters is how you describe it to the players.
Yeah.
Let's say the players are going along through a sewer or something, and they see, oh no, there's these, large-sized humanoids with claws, and you attack them, and what's that? They're healing somehow. Every player is going to know, oh, it's a troll. Oh, we got to hit him with fire. Now it's dead for real. There goes the encounter. That was not interesting at all. Whether you mean to or not, every player on some level, even if they're trying not to metagame, they're going to be like, well, I could attack with this fire attack, or I guess I won't because my character doesn't know what trolls are. Okay, but the mistake was that you told the players that they were fighting trolls. Maybe you didn't say they were fighting trolls, but you told them through your description, oh, it's that same monster that everybody knows. But let's say they're going through the sewer and instead, holy crap, there's a large-sized two-headed alligator. And it attacks the players. One of the heads bites them, another head bites them, and then it tears them apart. It does a rend attack. Oh no, that thing's crazy. Yeah, let's beat the crap out of it. Okay, it's dead. Let's walk away. Holy crap, this alligator just got back up and it's attacking us again. And then, maybe the players think, oh, it's got regeneration. Let's try fire on it. And then they kill it. Numerically, they just killed a troll. But story-wise, flavor-wise, that was an entirely unique monster that those players have never encountered. Recently, I was running a 4th edition game, which, Jeff, you were a part of.
Yeah.
And 4th edition is, it's a bit tricky as far as encounters go because everything is so based around the mechanics. So, like, when you use an iconic monster, the mechanics are really what they provide you with in the game. And so it's hard not to use the mechanics. But the thing is, a lot of the iconic monsters that they put in the monster manual are like really high level because the game is kind of meant to be played for a long time and whatever. But like there will be different versions of it. Some are more powerful than others. Anyway, this is a terrible digression here, but I encountered many times in this campaign where I wanted to use a specific monster for a specific reason, for thematic purposes.
Right.
But that monster is like 5 levels higher than I wanted it to be. So I realized so often I could just take another monster that had a similar ability and then, or just an ability that was more in keeping with what I wanted, and then just describe it differently. There was a time where I had you guys fight it was an ogre, and then also in the room there was like an animated pillar that attacked you guys.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I can just use the stats for, I think it was an ochre jelly, because it can fight you guys for the first part of the encounter, and then when it gets to half hit points, it splits in half. Now I can have that other half be this animated pillar that comes to life. Or there's a half-troll dwarf that you guys fought. This was Shackled City for anybody, a 4th edition version of Shackled City for anybody who's played Shackled City. You guys were up against a half-troll dwarf. Well, there's no stats for a half-troll dwarf in 4th edition. I could have made something unique just by, creating my own monster. Why not just take the young white dragon, which was in the monster manual, which was the exact level that I wanted. It had the same type of attacks that I wanted. It had like 2 wings or 2 claws and then a bite. And then I just decided, hey, that can perfectly resemble the troll's rend ability.
Yeah.
And then like I had his breath weapon just be like this really big crazy swing with his Urgrosh that he was holding. So there is so much mileage you can get out of taking an existing monster and then just describing it as something different. Yeah. So if you need a more powerful challenge and you want to keep the flavor, just use a more powerful monster, a more powerful stat block, and just describe it as the monster that you wanted in the first place. So there's so much you can get out of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, and like you said, it's something that's gonna, dealing with that 2-headed alligator instead of a troll, it's gonna be more exciting to the players because it's like this might be the first 2-headed alligator they've ever dealt with, and so it's it's unique to them. And yeah, stat wise, yes, it's just a troll, but I mean, like, it could definitely make it a lot more exciting because you're not metagaming and thinking ahead. But yeah, like, and I can see some people having a problem with like more people who are more like strict by the rules sort of people who people who play by the book a little bit more strictly might have problems with that. It's like, well, if you're using the troll stats, why not just have a troll? Or
Well, I mean there is an argument to be made there, but I think actually the way that this was first described to me, now that I'm thinking about it, is that so much of the experience of playing D&D is the magic. Now, I don't mean, casting spells. I mean...
Not magic missile.
The magic of being in this mysterious fantasy world. Eventually, after playing the game enough, everything is going to be familiar to you. That just happens. It's part of being creature. It's part of being something that exists. Eventually, you will become familiar, and familiarity breeds contempt? Or is it contentment?
Contentment.
One is good, one is bad. Whatever the case.
You get bored.
You will get bored eventually.
Yeah.
That it just happens, but there's always ways to combat it. So if encountering a troll is less magical to your players than encountering a two-headed alligator that keeps getting up after you kill it, then go with the alligator. Like, yeah, you might be sacrificing a little bit of the iconic stuff that is D&D, but which do you want? An iconic monster or the magic that comes with encountering an iconic monster for the first time?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like there's something really cool about like a beholder. Like a beholder is this iconic monster, and people can identify what a beholder is really easily. It's this monster with a bunch of eyes. But yeah, like you look at a beholder, you see a beholder, and you're like I mean, like anytime I encounter a beholder in any game whatsoever, I'm like, oh, this is this is going to be a problem. But so yeah, there's something about like seeing something and knowing what it is and knowing what it can do and being like, oh my god, I like what am I going to do about this? But yeah, but at the same time, if you come across something new, like that could be equally as like intimidating because you don't know what this is going to do and what this is going to be. So there are some games and things like that where like I try to be like more purist. Like I don't play games with mods as much as some people do because like I like things the way that the developer intended it to be. So like in a similar way, like I wouldn't want somebody to change up my monster in a D&D campaign, but that, I mean, I don't know. I guess that's not really true because I did really enjoy that. Like the thing you did. Well, was it an ogre or wasn't it? Yeah, it was an ogre. It was the ogre.
It was an ogre that was originally an Atyug.
Yes. Okay.
So,
but no, like that was really cool the way that basically like we were fighting this animated pillar that when it got down to half health, like instead of splitting into two as per the mechanics of the ochre jelly, like a ogre showed up and was like, hey, what's all that noise? Like as long as you could keep the flavor of what you want, you can basically make a monster as challenging as you want. The
important thing to remember is that you're there to have a good time. You're there to if you're the DM, you're there to present a compelling story that that you enjoy as well as everybody else. If you're the player, you're there to experience this great story. So anything that can make the game more enjoyable, depending on the situation, is probably worth a little bit of giving up, I guess, the integrity, but I guess that makes it sound like it's a bad thing. You're there to have a good time. So whatever you have to do to have a good time, do it.
Yeah. Or just, add templates.
That's
to add templates to the monster. If it's not challenging enough, make it a half white dragon.
Right.
or half troll, half black dragon, it was a war troll.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, yeah. Sorry.
I remember back in the 3rd edition days, my friend Chris, he would talk when I first started playing with him, he would talk about all these templates that he would add to monsters, and I thought it was hilarious because he would make something that was both fiendish and half fiend at the same time.
Oh my goodness.
So
half fiendish, half fiend.
Yep. Well, my mother was a fiend and my father was a fiend. Anyway, all right. This is from Reddit user Rod C.
Rod C. How do you say no to players, whether it's with character concepts, home brewing, or anything else? So saying no to players, and it's definitely something that could be, I guess, depending on the DM, easy or hard.
Yeah. There are a lot of people who will say, don't say no to your players. That is very hard. So I'm not necessarily saying never say no to your players, but try not to say no to your players.
Yeah.
When a player brings something that you really don't think fits, a couple questions should be asked. Really, the same question to yourself and to the player. You should ask yourself, is it really a problem? Sometimes it is. Most of the time it's not. You might have to change your outlook a little bit to fit in something that a player wants to include, but most of the time, it's really not that big of a deal. Like if you just go ahead and let a player do something, most of the time you'll be happier with what results than what you would have done otherwise. So ask yourself, is this really a problem? And then ask the player, why do you really want this? So I guess it's not really the same question. It's the same root question, is like, you ask yourself, why is this a problem? And then ask the player, why do you want this? If the player wants something that can be accomplished some other way, some way that is more in keeping with what you had in mind, then, do your best to explain that to the player. Just one thing, a game that I was in, a game that I DM'd a whole bunch of years ago, I had a player come to me. These were mostly new people. I told them all, okay, just pick a race and class from the player's handbook. There were a lot of 3rd edition books that were out at the time, but I told them just player's handbook only. Just keep this simple, because like most of the players had never played D&D before, so I didn't want to give them a ton of options.
Yeah.
Then this one player comes up and he says, okay, I want to play a vampire. And I'm like, you can't play a vampire. There's not a vampire in the player's handbook. Why do you want to play a vampire? And he's like, oh, well, I want my character to be more, dark and unique. And like, I tried explaining, well, I mean, you can get that with player's handbook stuff. It's all a matter of how you describe it. It's like what I was saying earlier with the changing the monster description. Right. You could take a human and describe them as being a vampire. If you don't expect any of the I can turn into a bat. If you don't expect a mechanical benefit from it, you can say your human character is a vampire. You can impose whatever restrictions you want on your character. You can say, oh yeah, my character dies if he's in sunlight. Okay, whatever. As long as you're not expecting a mechanical benefit, you can describe your character however you want. But this player, he didn't really want to hear any of that. He was saying, no, it wouldn't be the same. I want like this, really unique thing. I want this romance from them, whatever. It was so frustrating. But I didn't want to just outright say no to him. So I came up with a compromise. I said, okay, here's an Eberron race that is in the Eberron handbook. So it is a player race. It doesn't have because he came with a couple other suggestions. I was like, ooh, I want to be this race and this race. And they all had level adjustments of 8 or more. So it's like, no, there is no way you can be.
He was getting into savage species.
Exactly.
Or something.
Yeah. And so I eventually came up
this wasn't me, was it?
No.
Okay.
And so I was saying no, you cannot be a vampire. There is no way to. This is just way too unbalanced. So I found this race in the Eberron book, the Changeling. They are a humanoid race that are descended from doppelgangers. And so they have a very minor ability to physically change their form. So I was like, how about this? Don't read what it says in the book. You're playing this race, but you are descended from a demon that could take different forms. And so you can make yourself look however you want. And this player, he gobbled it right up. He was like, yes, I want that. That is so cool. I'm going to be the coolest player at this table. Well, when it came time to actually play the game, you know what he did what his typical interaction at the gaming table was?
What?
I rolled a hit.
Oh, goodness.
All right, I hit. I'll roll damage. And he didn't do anything with this. If it was he was actually going to make a big role-playing effort to play a vampire, as ridiculous as that would be better than what he did do, which was just sit there and do nothing. By and large, the most interesting player in the group was the girl that was playing a human druid, because she was funny and she engaged with other players. She engaged with the NPCs. So in that case, it wasn't that he wanted something unique. It was that he wanted something that he felt was different. He had his own vision of what would make an interesting character, but in practice, it was not really the case.
Well, so I guess in that it's just saying yes or making the compromise with him didn't really change the game much, because the player himself wasn't just very engaging. Yeah. Which that's some people are quiet, some are
Yeah, and I'm not saying that
that doesn't necessarily make him a bad player per se.
I would say it maybe made him a bad fit for that group. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So.
And maybe even he just needed time to get into it. That's fine. There's room for all kinds of players. But in that particular case, I think it was good to say no to him because what he wanted was not what he was getting. And so, but I still feel good having compromised with him because, like I said before, it's important to have a good time. Everybody's there to have a good time. Yeah. If I can help this player have a good time, if I can steer him towards what I think it is he actually wants, I think that's better than just saying yes.
Right. Because just saying yes could complicate things and make it hard, and make the experience bad for other players. Mm-hmm. But making the compromise and at least throwing them some throwing a bone in some way or another, can at least keep them in the game and keep them from getting upset and not wanting to play again.
Right.
That sort of thing. And
now there's another example, actually, that involves someone that is here on the podcast with me today, Jeff.
I don't know.
In this Shackled City campaign that I mentioned a little while ago, mm-hmm. When you guys were coming up with characters and everything, and I did want it to be just Player's Handbook, or at least I think I might have said Player's Handbook 2. It was 4th edition, so there was already a ton of stuff out, but you wanted to play a Warforged, which is actually another Eberron race.
Yeah.
But one that is a bit harder to reconcile thematically with a non-Eberron world.
Right. So I'm very, very guilty of this, of wanting to play a type of character that doesn't necessarily always fit into a campaign setting.
But as we will explain, that is not the worst thing possible. Like, right. I'm totally happy with what happened.
Mm-hmm. We had a good time with it, I think.
Yeah. So it basically came down to, well, is there a good way to make a Warforged work in a non-Eberron setting? In this case, it was a homebrew world that I was making, where, granted, Warforged still don't really fit, but there's always a way to make something fit. It's all a matter of how you describe it, how you can fit the pieces together yourself. So was it your idea or Steve's idea that you woke up in a cave?
I think it was Steve that came up with the idea.
Okay.
Because it was basically what we were trying to do with it was make it so that because I was a Warforged in a world that didn't necessarily fit with Warforged, find a way to make it so it wasn't like a big deal to the world.
Yeah. And so, because I think that was my big complaint. It's like, I don't want the party to walk into a bar and then it's like, oh, look, okay, there's a human, there's an elf. Oh, and there's a robot in a world where robot is not a word.
It's like, or if anything, it's like, oh, there's a golem. Somebody might recognize me as a golem and be like, this is a powerful magical thing, monster. Like, what is this? Make a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And so what we ended up doing was Jeff's character, Crush, he kind of woke up in a cave one day, right?
All right, I think the other characters found him or something.
Oh, I think I'm actually combining that with some other time you wanted to play a Warforged.
Okay.
Sorry. So the other characters, when they were children, found this metal man out in the wild somewhere.
Yeah, kind of out in the wild.
And they brought him home to their town, and everybody was like, holy crap, what is this thing? They shipped him off to the local the local university to study him and find out what the heck makes him tick and so on. And so when the campaign starts, this is many years later, after the novelty of this animated golem has kind of worn off. It's just, people are still like, oh, look, it's him. Oh, it's just him. Yeah, whatever.
So, they recognize me easier than most people, but I'm still just like, oh, he's been around for, 20, 30 years. We know who that is.
And because I was, as the DM, forced to fit him into the world, that got me thinking, well, where did he come from? What are some possible explanations for where this completely unique being, where he came from? And I think it turned out really well. I think we came up. I mean, we never really got to a point where you were able to learn exactly what that is. Maybe someday I'll tell you.
Right.
Maybe. But I don't know. In that case, it was much better to say yes and then work with the player to find a way to make it work. So it's important to know when to say yes and when to say no. You'll really only learn that as time goes on. You got to learn with experience. We all do. But try not to say no. But sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
Just make sure that when you say no, you know why you're saying no.
Yeah, it's like whether it be like it's just gonna affect the mechanics too much. It's it's game breaking, or it's gonna make it unfair or not fun for the rest of the party, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Or if it's just gonna make it way too hard for you to stretch it into like to weave it into the story, like it just does not fit at like if in a D&D campaign's based in Faerun, somebody wants a laser gun, like in that case you're like, all right, no,
right,
like we'll get you a really sweet crossbow or something, but
yeah. So I would say if you're gonna say no, try to say no on issues of balance rather than thematics. There's always a different way of thinking that makes it make perfect sense. Like you can always rationalize anything if you try hard enough. If you are willing to come up with a good enough way to think of it, there's always a way that you can make it fit thematically. So I would be much more okay with saying no to somebody for balance reasons. So yeah, I think that will just about do it for today.
Okay.
Let's go out on one more question. This is from Paizo user Baron Aaron Heshvaughn. What is your favorite gaming snack, Jeff?
Ooh, favorite gaming snack. Shoot. That's a tough one. I usually I can't really think of one.
Oh, okay. I thought this would be an easy one.
I thought so too. Okay, I read it earlier. I'm like, yeah, okay, that'll be easy. But I can't quite. I don't drink soda as much anymore, but like I was like a Mountain Dew type drink.
I'm shaking my head. For those who cannot see me, which is everybody, I'm shaking my head at Jeff because he said he doesn't drink soda as much. And that's a shame.
I'm sorry.
Say what you will about the health benefits or drawbacks. I think soda is the most delicious thing in the entire universe.
It is. I enjoy soda a lot. I enjoyed it too much,
I suppose.
Okay. So I'd say it's saying what my favorite gaming snack. Snacks to avoid.
Sure.
Greasy or like things like Cheetos.
Yeah.
While a good staple of a nerdy diet. They get messy. The grease and the powder gets all over.
Yeah.
Things
Anything
like that.
that's going to be messy, I think, is something to avoid.
Unless you bring like chopsticks. Do like the Cheeto.
And if you're that guy,
the Cheeto,
just stay home.
No, come on.
No, I'm sorry.
Cheetos with chopsticks.
Yeah.
I think I have a guess as to what yours is.
Well, I mean, there's a couple, but go on.
Well, one thing I know that Gabe enjoys while DMing is now and laters.
I enjoy now and laters. My players do not enjoy when I have now and laters because you cannot understand me.
If you don't know what a now and later is, it's kind of like it's a starburst that lasts a lot longer.
Yeah. Although I'm going to be perfectly honest, I haven't had now and laters in a long time.
That's true.
Because maybe I'm insane, but I think that their quality has gotten noticeably worse over the years.
You hear that now and later?
They are not as tangy as they used to be. They are also, the consistency is not quite as firm.
Man, shots fired.
I know.
Now and
So
later.
now and laters.
Do you know who makes now and laters?
I don't even know.
Oh, well, watch out.
Probably Nestle. They make everything.
Yeah, that's true.
So now and laters, and then drink-wise, definitely RC Cola.
Yes.
The delicious ambrosia that is RC Cola.
Royal Crown.
Yep, the royalist of the crowns.
Yeah. That is a good cola. I like that.
Well, I think that'll do it for today. So this has been InterPartyConflict. If you want to reach us, there are a few ways you can do so. You can find us on Twitter. We have a Twitter. It is InPartyConflict. And we have a website, which is interpartyconflict.blogspot.com. Hopefully by the time that this is up, you will be able to find us on iTunes. Hopefully that's where you got us from. Also, you can find us on Reddit at reddit.com/r/interpartyconflict. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask us, that is our bread and butter. So please send them to interpartyconflict@gmail.com. Any questions, any comments, send them there. And hopefully we can have a great podcast and help you all be the best players you want to be.
Yeah. Or DMs,
Or DMs, yes. So, yeah, thank you for joining us, and I guess we will see you next time.
Bye.